Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sanderlanche podcast. This week we are covering Mistborn, The Final Empire, chapters 6 and 7. Is that right? Yes, 6 and 7. I have it right up in front of me, and yet I always question it. I'm like, wait, did I say the right thing? Anyway, this is Data, and with me is...
Jack.
Jamie.
And Joe.
And in this week's chapters, we get a lot of detail. And Vin gets her first lesson. So, without any further ado, hold on, everybody. The Sanderlanche is about to begin.
My revolution carries me in a moment lost in time. My revolution sets me free. I will flow across the lines. Bring up the brother in me. I'm searching for...
So, everybody, what were your overall thoughts of these two chapters?
They weren't quite as action-packed as I was sort of expecting after the last one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting out of these chapters, but it was definitely a bit of a breather compared to what we got last time.
Yeah, we ended last time with a lot of action, and now it's a lot of talking.
Yep. Which, I mean, the talking makes sense as far as the whole plan coming together, but then, the lesson was... It started out fairly quiet, and I presume it'll get more intense next chapter, unless they completely glaze over it.
What about everybody else? What do you guys think?
Sorry, I had to just lock out the cat.
Of course, that's how cats are.
It's all right. We're just recording. It's fine. Okay, I'm back. I liked these chapters. I sort of thought that the chapter with all the planning, there was a lot of talking. There was a lot of insight into how these characters interact with each other as well. You've got Kelsia about who's going to do what, how are they going to take down the Final Empire, what are they going to do, and yet he's already started this plan. So I'm sort of thinking about how much is going to involve the input of the other people, how much of this plan is he still sort of keeping to himself. He's acting before he's consulting in some things as well. Obviously things like he doesn't have the whole plan, but he already sort of had the idea to, I thought it was sort of an interesting interaction to observe this unfolding.
Yeah, he definitely, we saw last chapter, he was already attacking these. He's like, hey, so I think my idea involves some attacking of these houses. So he wasn't waiting for input. That's true. What about you, Joe?
A good amount of exposition in the chapters, which I liked. I agree with Jamie. There's some pretty decent character development. They're really pushing that Vin is being thrust into this kind of world where she's having to deal with these people that do things that she completely does not expect because she's not used to the kind of the way that they treat each other, the way that they treat her. She's just not used to it. So she's still extremely suspicious and extremely cautious at every single step. It's kind of interesting to see a character from that perspective, because I feel like I'm a pretty trusting person to the point that I can be somewhat gullible. And so the way that she kind of treats each of these characters, it's unexpected for me. As a person, it's like, oh, I wouldn't do what she's doing. But of course, I also haven't had the life that she's had. So very interesting kind of character development for her. And at the same time, I like that in the last chapter that we read, that we're getting into some of the beginning of training stuff for her. So I'm kind of excited. These chapters were kind of more of the kind of stuff that I like to get out of books and novels. So I really liked them.
So you wouldn't be like sneaking upstairs and looking through the keyhole to see what Dachshund is doing when he's in his room?
No, probably not. I might ask like, hey, what were you doing in your room? But I wouldn't, I wouldn't be sneaking around looking through keyholes for sure.
You're just not careful enough if you're not looking through everybody's keyhole, obviously.
Yeah, you're right. I'm clearly not cut out to be a thief or a crew member of a thief guild or anything like that. So
Well, we start out this the epigraph here is more talk about how he has to stop the deepness, whoever this person is, and he has to go to Terrace to do it. And it puts in this whole thing that he says that he can feel whatever it is that's their goal. He can sense it, and others cannot. It pulses in his mind. So that's a strange little note there.
I took note of the fact that it mentions the deepness. And I was like, can't remember if we've come across that or not. But then throughout this chapter, when they're talking about the Lord Ruler, Vin makes a note that he is the one who saved us from the deepness. I thought, okay, yeah. So again, seems like another hint that this person narrating this is probably meant to be him.
Yeah, I think before this chapter, the only time we'd heard about the deepness was the epigraph from the chapter before this, where he's like, the deepness has to be stopped. It's going to leave nothing but dust and bones, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I it's so funny. All this time I thought, well, maybe these are being written by the Lord Ruler. But when Vin kind of mentions that the Lord Ruler saved us from the deepness, it almost makes me, because of all the false things she believes about the Lord Ruler that Kelsier points out, it almost makes me think that maybe it's not him. Maybe these are written by a person who actually saved the world from the deepness, and maybe the Lord Ruler took credit for it.
So you think maybe it's almost too obvious how they put that in the epigraph of the chapter, and then they specifically mention in the chapter that it was
right.
Interesting.
Yeah, or I mean, maybe they are just saying, "Yep, that is the confirmation that these epigraphs were written as like journal entries by the Lord Ruler." But I really don't know. I like and dislike at the same time the mystery that they're kind of building up about the Lord Ruler. I'm almost going to feel disappointed if he doesn't meet the expectations I'm building in my head about him.
So what kind of expectations is that?
I don't know, some kind of person who originally had good intentions, but then was corrupted either by power or by some force, and then somehow became this eternal deity, maybe because he's possessed by something. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of ways his character could be really, really interesting, that I'm just hoping that he is interesting, and that it's not just oh no, he's an evil person,
Okay, well, let's see. We start out the chapter with Vin wakes in a quiet room, and she's like, this is weird because I'm not shoved in here with 20 other people. I'm not supposed to have my own room, which is a little bit sad, but we know her life has been like that.
Yeah, it's fairly typical.
And then she opens her door and just starts spying on people walking by in the hallway, see what everybody's doing, until Dachshund spots her. He's like, hey, you should go take a bath. You smell.
Yeah, I was about to say, you probably think she smells.
Well, when you're shoved in one room with 20 other people all the time, that wouldn't surprise me. Let's see. And then I like how, as we're progressing here, there's a spot where she's like, Clubs is a misting. Dachshund said he was a smoker. I'll probably forget what that means for myself. She just keeps thinking these things they're going to be trying to withhold this information as long as possible. They're going to make me figure it all out on my own so they can keep this power over me, which makes the next chapter all the more interesting because Kelsey's just like, oh, let me explain everything you want to know.
I think it's just, I suspect Kelsey understands how she thinks. He's probably been there, so he's trying to just do everything possible to completely disarm her suspicions and make her think, hey, maybe things aren't as bad as you think they are now that you're with us. Whether or not that'll succeed is another matter. I'm starting to get the impression that she's going to flake on them at the worst possible time, but for the moment, it seems like he's just trying his hardest to make sure she's okay and she actually does start to trust them properly rather than just always be on edge, always looking for an exit.
That would be interesting if the focal point or one of the focal point characters, a main character in the book, is just turns and runs at the exactly worst moment.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they're laying it on so thick that she is just constantly on edge, looking for the betrayal, looking for the problem, and then it turns out because of her suspicions, maybe she is the problem. I don't know. We'll see when we get to it if it comes up.
Right. And you almost feel like when it's setting that up, where it's there's someone who's always looking for some sort of betrayal or some sort of problem, that it's kind of the perfect opportunity for one of those classic sitcom misunderstandings where someone thinks that someone else betrayed them and it fulfills all of her expectations and so on and so forth, which I don't know, might not be very fun. Let's see. So she smells funny. She thinks they put perfume in her bathwater, and she's like, I don't like that. It's going to make people notice me. And she talks about how clean everything is, how it's kept swept of ash, and everyone's dressed in clean clothes. She knows that the whole crew, like, she's never seen them, like, ash stained like everyone else. Which really goes with her statement, I guess, kind of earlier in the chapter. He's like, these guys are more like noblemen than they are like ska, even though they're all, like, technically ska.
Yeah, they actually take the time to clean up.
Outrageous, right?
Horrific.
And then Ham shows up and gets some food, and he says, hey, where is everybody? And Vin knows exactly where everybody is because she's been spying on everyone at all times. And he's like, do you always do that? She's like, yes. He goes, you're an odd kid, Vin. And I also like how right after that she, like, takes some of these food wraps that are in there for everyone, and she's like, I'm gonna scrape out, like, the barley and eat them and keep the bread for later because it'll keep for when I need food.
You don't need to worry about that. They're going to give you more food, but again...
Yeah, she's just not used to thinking that way. She's used to thinking, like, how can I make this last as long as possible? How can I save up for a rainy day? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, she's just always expects, like, I may not see food again for weeks, so...
Yeah, it's very little pack rat mentality.
Yep.
You have to wonder how long it'll take her in this life where people are nicer and feeding her constantly to stop doing that. Oh, and then we get the kid comes to get her for the meeting, and I got to see what you guys thought of this, because he says, you're wanted, ups in the where, above with the doing, with master jumps to the 3rd floor. And I swear the first time I read that, I thought I just had a stroke or something. Like, what did he just say?
I had to read it 3 times. It's like, what?
My immediate thought was that supposed to make sense? And then I read further down the page, and that was also Vin's first thought. I'm like, oh, good.
Yeah, it did. I thought there was something wrong with the kid, like he was having a stroke, but or like that he was just like nervous to talk to her, so he just had complete like jumble mouth. But then I guess they explained that it's his dialect or whatever, which is really weird.
His slang or something.
Street slang.
Yeah, they're like, do you always talk in the Eastern street slang? And wasing of the place yetting when just more stuff. And they're like, yeah, this guy's not going to do well impersonating a nobleman. Let's not use it. Which I don't blame them for.
But yeah, when he initially said that, I'm just like, did this just go into like a high school rom-com all of a sudden, and this is the dude who's just fumbling, asking out the girl?
That would be funny. Just like completely so tongue-tied that he's just like not making any sense.
Just throws the flowers at her head and runs away.
We do see that he's like blushing when talking to her and like avoids looking at her later, so maybe there is something going on there.
Yeah.
Or maybe he just doesn't talk to women like ever.
Yeah, could be.
True.
And then we go up to the meeting, and everyone is in the meeting except for one empty chair, who Kelsier still refuses to say anything about. Ham's like, hey, who sits there? And he's like, yeah, wink. And so they come up with the framework for they come up with a plan, basically, which we thought that they'd had their whole Ocean's 11 moment in the last episode where they gather everybody and they're like, here's what we're going to do. But, I mean, and Jamie mentioned at the time, she's like, there's a lot of really tough things that they're going to do, and we have no idea how they're going to do these things. And so, once again, they answer the question really fast by just being like, okay, here's the chapter where we explain how we're going to do all these things that we want to do.
I like that he's got everything right down to the board with the chalk, and they're all set up to go. It's like, all right, so we actually really are going to go solid into planning, because a lot of stories will just breeze over that sort of thing. So I like how they take the time. It's like, all right, let's start with what are our list of problems that we need to solve, and then start going with that, and they start writing, all right, so now we need solutions to all these, and then we need people who are going to take care of these solutions. Like, there's a lot of just laying it all out there, but it's like going into every detail you possibly need for a plan like this. So,
and setting out a timeline and the different stages. You know, are we going to distract first? Are we going to get these houses, against each other? And sort of just thinking through the logistics of it, which I thought that was quite good, especially when we're looking at how Alamancy works and things. It's very real. It's very physics. we understand how that works. So to have these, like, I guess, real world application of sorting out these problems, it's that's quite good.
Yeah, I definitely
got a bit
like
of a timeline too. We
that.
know that they're looking at like a year of planning and executing, and hopefully this isn't something we see resolved in the next chapter.
Yeah, well, the year timeline sort of threw me for a bit, because I'm just like, whoa, hang on, aren't they planning this out because they're going to put things into action straight away? And then I thought about it for a second. It's like, no, that makes sense. They're trying to raise an army. They're trying to get 10,000
Yeah.
people armed and trained and ready. It's like, actually, no, a year sounds like a good time frame. It just means that
Right.
like there's more time for things to go wrong.
And
Hmm,
raising an
sure.
army out of a group of people who so far haven't been willing to,
Yeah.
actually join the rebellion. They're not interested in participating. So they already know that in itself is going to be a challenge. And even the concept of a year, I think Breeze was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, everything that's been happening up till now in these first few chapters is happening so fast that it's suddenly like, wait, a year? But yeah, I mean, getting 10,000 people together and training them probably takes a little bit.
Just a bit. A little bit.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to see in the book how is that going to play out. Like, are they going to go through the steps of what's going on in a year, or in the next 2 chapters are we going to be? It's been a year, and I've learned
12
all
months
this,
later.
Yeah, I've learned all there is to know about being a Mistborn, or so I thought.
That would kind of fit with how fast things have been moving so far, right? But I feel like
Just do it.
if they took all this time to outline all of that, and then we're like, and now all that's done that we just talked about, that would be a little bit insane.
Just like the total Simpsons moments, like, boy, that was an eventful last 12 months. I know, so much happened, right?
I remember that episode, although I don't remember what episode it was. It was just like, yeah, I won this medal and this thing, and we did this and that.
I think that was when Apu and his wife had the babies, because it skipped over the 9th month that she was pregnant.
Oh, right.
Ah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
With the octuplets.
That's the one.
Uh-huh.
Classic.
I just watched the episode where they sue for the rights to Itchy.
I don't think
Oh,
I've seen that one.
With the old guy in his solid gold rocket car or whatever.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, that one.
Yeah, Kirk Douglas.
That's right.
Also classic Simpsons.
That guy reminds me of Yedden.
He is a grumpy old man.
Yeah, it's true.
And I like that one of the problems that they write up on the board is Yedden's bad attitude, because he's like, if we're listing problems, what about the fact that we're all insane? Which, it's like, dude, this is your idea, right? You're the one who came up with the whole thing. Why are you always so
Yeah.
negative, Yedden?
They keep
Like-
they keep talking about like taking over the city, and he's like, "There's no way you're going to be able to do this," and they're like, "You're the one who wants us to take over the city. You're
You're the one
who's
paying us.
Yeah, you're the one who's going to be in charge of the city." Honestly, I think what's happening is Yedden doesn't want to be the leader of the rebellion. He wants, as we learn a little bit later, Marsh was the leader of the rebellion
Mhm.
before, and I think he wants Marsh to lead it again. I don't think he
It's
wants
like-
to do it.
As soon as he saw Marsh in the doorway, he's just like, oh my god, welcome back, thank you.
Yeah, he's just so excited to see Marsh. He's like, "Please take this responsibility away from me. I don't want to do it."
Well, given that Marsh shows up after all of the stuff that he's so uncomfortable with happens, I think half of it may be like, oh, good, you're here. You can deal with Kelsier because he's out of his mind.
Yeah. But it's like, right, when he wrote up Yedden's bad attitude on the board, I thought to myself, all right, that's the best part of the chapter. And then, no, the best part of the chapter turned out to be when he said, all right, now how do we solve these problems? Except for Yedden's bad attitude, we're never solving that.
We can all
Yeah.
agree he's always.
Yeah, I think they mentioned something pretty important in this chapter as well. A lot of this plan is predicated on, at least Kelsier's objectives are predicated on him knowing how to use the 11th metal, and he tells them in the chapter, like, I don't know how to use it yet, I'll figure it out.
He's got a year.
He does. Well, and he even tells us in the next chapter, he's like, if you burn a metal that's not one of the metals that works, that it can do bad things. So I can understand why you just wouldn't down it and try it out.
What, you mean like Vin did? It's
Well,
like, maybe if I try doing this. Oh god, why?
Yeah.
it's true. She's like, God, it attacked me. It's all that thing's fault. He's like, no, you kind of attacked yourself.
It's like, no, that one's on you, bruh.
He's like, there's a reason I didn't tell you how to do it just yet. It's not because I'm trying to keep things from you. It's because it's dangerous.
It's just her whole suspicion thing again, where she's like, this is the thing that he's going to try to keep from me. I'm going to figure it out for myself.
Which is not great logic, because if he was really trying to keep it from her, he wouldn't have given her all of the medals. He would have
Right.
just given her, like, the ones he wanted her to know about.
But he doesn't take offense at it or anything. He's like, I should have known that would happen. You nut. Okay, so they're talking, plan, and Vin realizes, holy crap, they're serious. I thought that they were full of shit this whole time. You're actually going to try to take over the final empire?
I think it was cool that she actually verbalized this for once rather than thinking it.
Right. that alone, I think, shows that she's opening up a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's also where, as we talked about earlier, it's mentioned that the Lord Ruler saved the world from the deepness and then brought the ash and the mists as punishment.
Some rescue.
Yeah, it just like that's those two items are kind of what make me think it's BS, right? Because it makes me think of the plot of Final Fantasy X. I make a lot of references. I apologize for people who don't know what I'm referencing. But
well,
like,
if
the
you
plot
haven't
of
played Final Fantasy X, then you
right.
suck. So
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So
thanks.
the plot of in Final Fantasy X, the big bad creature that they have to fight as the boss is the doctrine. All the religious doctrine says that he's the physical incarnation of their sins, and that if they atone for their sins, that he'll go away. And it's like, yeah, that's not actually what's happening at all.
spoilers.
True, but the game came out in 2001, so if you haven't played it in 19 years, it's your own fault.
That's probably true. The giant monster called Sin turns out not actually Sin. And it kind of is almost at odds with the guy that we're seeing in the epigraphs, who seems like kind of a nice dude and kind of concerned about the things that he's having to do. And so then after that, for him to have turned around and been like, now I'm going to punish all of you who did not have faith in me. But maybe it was just, he beat the deepness and got some sort of power that corrupted him.
Maybe the process was of beating the deepness was so traumatic it broke him, and he succeeded, but he came out of it a changed man.
Mm.
He who fight monsters and all that sort of stuff.
Mm. So Kelsier starts asking for ideas, and everybody's like, well, this sounds really impossible. And this is where they talk about, there's no way to get the Ska to rise up in a general revolution. They just are too beaten down over 1,000 years of being Lord Ruler slaves to actually revolt, which is why you have to get a smaller group to kind of do this.
They think they have a good union, but they don't. They're basically slaves.
I don't think they have a good union. They have to brush ash off of plants all day long and get beaten.
Sure.
Although apparently Clubs is a Ska with a fairly prestigious position.
Yeah, they make mention of that. It almost makes me think of the French classes in Tale of Two Cities, where it's you've got the peasants, but then you have the people that are tradespeople, and they're a little bit higher up in the class system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's they're still the same, lower class, but they're so talented it'd be stupid to ignore the fact that they'd be useful,
right.
More useful in this capacity than as just go brush the ash off the street or something. Is the fact that he makes stuff, he's a woodworker, is that why he's called Clubs? Because he makes clubs?
I don't know that we've seen him make clubs, although he does mention that he could make some war staffs. Maybe.
Yeah, it's he talks about, I could churn out an extra staff or two a day, and wait, is that why you're Clubs?
Well, I mean, I don't know that we want to get too deep into why anyone's called anything, although we did talk about Breeze, and you're like, it totally fits for Breeze to be named Breeze, because he's this easygoing kind of asshole guy. But then you start looking at Ham, and I'm
that was just short for Hammond.
That's true. I don't know.
Because we need a character from Top Gear.
The kid who is Club's Offsider, though, I think they talk about his name and that it's a bit of that he's probably going to need a nickname as well. So maybe they just get nicknames. Maybe it's not necessarily related to.
Do we even know?
Lestaborn Knees or something.
Yeah.
Do we even know if Vin is her actual name? Is
I
that
don't think
confirmed?
we do.
So it may be a thief name.
Could be a nickname, yeah.
Possibly.
Since all the thieves seem to... a lot of the guys that she worked with in that crew didn't seem to really have nicknames, though. They had more names. Kamen and Ulef and Marin, or whatever the guy's name was, who's in charge now.
Well, it would just fit with her character to be hiding, because especially if she was the daughter of a nobleman, that she may not want to be using her real name just in case.
Mm. I don't know if a legitimate daughter of a nobleman even gets a last name in this society, because they're not supposed to exist.
Just on the topic of names, actually, going back a bit to the Lord Ruler, Vin mentions the fact that he's seen as the creator and punisher of humankind and whatnot. The fact that he was mentioned as the creator sort of stuck out of my mind. It's if he's created everything and made this, why is this the final empire? How can there be an empire before this one if he created everything?
You're right. That doesn't make much sense.
And
you can't create it.
It's not the final empire if it's also the
Right.
first one.
Yeah.
Well, it can be if he doesn't intend for there to be another empire after him.
Yeah, I guess. Oh, you get just as much out of the only empire.
The only empire, right?
The final empire is way more dramatic.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
fair.
Setting yourself up for someone to challenge accepted.
He clearly has enemies outside of his kingdom, though, because they talk kind of about that as like he needs to keep his city safe from whatever is out there trying to attack him or whatever. So there's obviously peoples that I feel like are not under his rule, or if they are, they kind of treat it as like, he exists out there, but we kind of do our own thing here.
Because I think when they're talking about how he has his armies out there, it's like because those areas are away from the center of his rule, so they're more likely to revolt, and that's why his armies are kind of out on the edges. So yeah, there's definitely some logical issues with this religion, and I feel like in one of the epigraphs we read, he may have even talked about if it really is the Lord Ruler, which we're still kind of up in the air on, but he talked about like some other kingdoms or something that existed at the time. But we also don't know 1,000 years later how much of the story survives as, fact and how much is just religious dogma or something at this point.
Yeah, point.
So he's been in charge for 1,000 years, and here's where we start talking about turning the great houses against each other, and Breeze and Hammond settle their bet because it's like, yep, Kelsier was sure behind that thing that happened last night.
I did like that. I thought that was a really cool little moment.
Yeah, I also wonder what Breeze thought happened since he made the bet against it.
Well, apparently the rumor was that, like, what was it, 3 full Mistborn showed up and tried to assassinate Straff Venture, they said. So he's like, wow, that guy has a high opinion of himself.
I mean, like people in glass houses and all that.
So true. And then Breeze also says the entire point of life is to find ways to get others to do things, to do your work for you. Don't you know anything about basic economics? I also like that.
God.
He's just such a jerk.
And I did like he annoys Ham. He's just like, oh, it was a rhetorical question. That's the best kind, damn it.
Yes, like Kelsier has to get everybody back on track. Like, okay, Ham, I know you love these theological arguments, but not right now. We're trying to figure out how to do this thing.
But I mean, like, as much as Breeze is a total dick, this chapter also exemplifies the fact that he's not an idiot. He's the one who points out a lot of the problems they're going to have and a lot of the things they need to overcome as they go throughout the chapter. Like, he picks up on things a lot quicker than a lot of the others do, so
Oh.
I guess it makes sense. A guy who's so interested in looking out for himself and can always spot a problem to himself.
Yeah, you got to figure most of these guys don't survive long if they're not they don't got a good head on their shoulders in this sort of world, even with the more refined thieves. But
yeah, it was just the fact that I think it was a couple of times he picked up on things before anyone else in the room did. It's like, guys, this is a problem, and they've all just gone, oh yeah, he's right.
Yeah, that's I even see one here where he's like, I hate to sound contrary, that's usually Hammond's job, but we have to figure out how to get rid of the garrison. And Dockson's like, yeah, he's got a point, dude.
Yep.
And Dockson, I think, is really filling out Joe's prediction of him during this meeting. He's like the guy who he's taking notes about everything, and he's the guy who's talking about logistics of how to do things. He's like, we got to get these shipments out here and make sure that everybody will fit in the space. And
luckily, like Vin's just like, where did he get that notebook?
Yeah. It's like, did you just swear? Okay, he's taking notes now? When did that happen?
Yeah, and she mentions earlier, like, she's like, she didn't mention to him that she knew Dockson was in his room scribbling on papers, which just gives you the impression that she doesn't think much of writing. She's like, he wasn't writing something, he was just scribbling on some papers.
Yeah, she doesn't know what he's doing with paper. It's like she's never done anything with paper, so he's like, he's just got some papers and he's doing something with them. I don't know what it is.
And then Kelsier starts to push Vin for an idea. Like, hey Vin, what do you think? Nobody else in the room has an idea. And she's like, no, don't look at me. I don't know what's happening here. Don't, please. And Breeze even tries to be like, don't intimidate her. She's just a kid. And he's like, no, come on, Vin. What do you got? And she manages to come up with the idea for how to, or at least the seed of the idea for how to get the garrison out of the city.
There's that great moment where she says and everyone just kind of looks at each other and just goes, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, Breeze is like, oh, now that's devious. And Vin doesn't even know exactly what she's come up with, but she's like, hey, I'm helping.
You did the thing.
But then she finds out she has to help in another way, and she is not at all prepared for that.
I mean, in fairness, it doesn't sound like anyone was prepared for that, because Kelsey is already ready to say, and we'll get Doxson to impersonate someone, and Doxson's just like, I'm sorry, what?
He's like, we didn't talk about this. I can't do that. No, I'm sorry.
It's like, would it kill you to ask me for once?
Oh, see, now I've got a cat in the way. Cat, move.
But it's not even a, he doesn't want to do it. He can't do it. He's been marked.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Ham says that, like, every job you do in Luthadel, you got to have somebody, like, spying on the nobility. But then it turns out that, like, none of these guys can really do it. Breeze is like, I've done it way too many times. People would know who I was. And Doxson mentions, interesting tiny note there, that he's like, the Lord Ruler saw me, and he has the perfect memory. So I guess that's one of the Lord Ruler's powers.
My mind immediately goes to, all right, which metal does that one?
Right? It doesn't seem to be any of the ones that we know about.
No. I'm still hung up on this ninth metal that we don't know anything about yet.
Mm-hmm. I think you're kind of meant to be at this point, because we've learned, it's like there's 10 metals, and we've learned about 9 of them. Why can't I know the last one? We also find out that Kelsier has killed a nobleman and replaced him, and that...
So that was... like Lord Renault, that was the one he was talking to the peasants in the prologue about, like the one who says, oh, he treats his scar fairly and pays them a wage and isn't a monster. So it's not that he met someone who actually is kind to the scar. He just set that up so he could tell the truth to them, in a manner of speaking.
Yeah, I wondered if you'd pick up on that. That was the same guy that he'd mentioned before, but yeah.
Yeah, and because I wasn't expecting the fact that Kelsier had replaced him. I was like, oh no, this guy really is a cool guy, like you mentioned in the prologue, but then that turns out to not be true.
No, turns out he was probably as bad as the rest.
And not just killed and replaced him, and Yedin's very upset about that. Yedin's like, what? No, you can't just go around killing noblemen. And Kelsier's like, dude, we're going to overthrow the entire empire. There's going to be a lot of dead noblemen on the floor before this thing is done.
Yeah.
I really feel like
what were
Yedin
you
just
thinking
has
was
not
going to
thought
happen?
this through at all.
Yeah.
It really doesn't seem like he has.
Right. And that's why I think he's like begging for somebody to take the responsibility away from him, because he's just like, I don't know what to do. This is crazy. I don't know if I could do this.
And it's... yeah, Yedin's upset about that, and it leads to another one of those things where he's like, this is a big risk that I don't think we should be taking. And they're like, well, you can always call the job off and we'll keep your money. They're just going to keep going back to that. Well, Yedin, if you're unhappy, then, we can just keep the money. It's okay. Breeze is like, don't be afraid of offending us. I look favorably upon free money.
So, can't really argue with that.
No, yeah, I'd totally be saying the same thing in his position. Like, hey, I love free money, sure. And then it turns out that not only has he just, replaced this guy, it is apparently something much worse than simply having replaced him. Breeze is like, oh, this is, 10 times worse than what you thought it was yet, and you don't want to know. And he's like, you're right, I don't think I want to know. Let's just keep going. So any theories about what exactly that means?
I thought maybe it was a mist wraith. We don't really know yet. We know that he can't come into the city. So, yeah, maybe that was my theory.
It has talked about them taking people's faces before, so that almost kind of fits.
And it's 10 times worse. No one wants to talk about it. No one really knows much about it. But Kelsey is quite comfortable in the mist. Yep. So that seems like something that would be up his alley.
I also like that Vin is really curious about what's going on, but she doesn't want to ask, because everyone else in the room except for Yen seems to understand, and she's like, I don't want to be that person who doesn't get it. And then we get to Vin having to impersonate a nobleman because nobody else can do it. Les de Bournis talks ridiculously, and everyone else has been spotted or would be too obvious. And Kelsier really doesn't. He doesn't even wait to get her sign off much. He's like, hey, how good are you at impersonating an nobleman? She's like, well, I've never actually. You're fine.
I did think that was a bit sudden, because he instantly wrote off Clubs' nephew. Just heard him speak for 2 sentences, all right, well, you're clearly out, and then goes to Vin and doesn't even try to give it any tests or anything like that. He just says, what about you? Yeah, you're good. Do you want to think about that for a second?
Yeah,
I guess though he's already had a little bit more interaction with her.
Yeah, It really made me think that was his plan all along, was to have her do that.
I could see that.
And if it wasn't for that, she wouldn't really have a job in the job at this point. So maybe you're right. Like, what else would she be doing?
Well, if she's
Sneaking around.
apprenticing. She's
Yeah.
apprenticing for him, so probably just shadow him. She's going to be his executive assistant.
Yeah. Sneaking around, stealing barley wraps or whatever. Bay wraps.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess maybe Kelsey is hoping, like, if Cameron was like the expert actor of the street crews, then maybe his crew should also know how to act good. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems kind of like Breeze is probably a good actor. It's just he's done it too many times. Hammond's like, I can't act. You know that I'm bad at that.
He blows his cover because someone asked him a rhetorical question.
It also may just because he wants, other than training her and teaching her about the Mistborn stuff, he wants her to be invested in the job, because if I mean, she really, other than learning about her power, she really has no reason to tie herself to these people, which she mentions quite a bit. It's like, if it wasn't for me wanting to know how I fit in with these powers, like, she might have just gone off on her own.
Yeah, like the second she learns about all the metals, she's like, okay, I'm out. And then we get into talk about the Lord Ruler, and Kelsier's like, I'm going to kill him if I can make this metal work, but if I don't, we'll figure out something else. And Yedin's like, well, what? And Kelsier's like, look, you didn't hire us to kill the Lord Ruler. That's just a perk that I'm going to throw in if possible, but it's going to be fine. Without all his armies and stuff, he's probably fine. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, what are you going to do? That's your problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you hired us to make you an army and give you a chance to seize the city. After that, it's all your problem. We don't care anymore. We will be rich. And I like Breeze's quote here where he's like, though if you think about it, hostile, dethroned pseudo-deities probably make disagreeable neighbors. You'll have to figure out something to do with them.
It's like, that's not untrue. All of it.
And then we get Marsh. Kelsier's just like, oh, Marsh will handle the ministry. And you hear, like, hell, I will.
Because apparently Marsh is just as good at Kelsier at the timing his dramatic entrance.
Yep. Gotta wonder how long he's been standing there.
He's just waiting outside the door. It's like, all right, I need a good line where I can burst in and really cut him down. Oh, there's one.
And that's kind of the end of the chapter. He's going to start talking. He's going to have a conversation with his brother. And we get into the next epigraph where it talks about how this guy who's off to defeat the Deepness has hired some terracemen as packmen, and one in particular, this guy named Rashek, is handsome and charismatic, but like super hateful. He's like, it amazes me that anyone could listen to a guy who speaks such hatred. He's never seen Klenium, yet he curses the city. He doesn't know me, and yet I can see the anger and hostility in his eyes.
So when they mentioned Klenium, I went back to the map and I'm like, is that anywhere on here? And I don't think it was. So I'm just like, all right, well, if this is in the distant past, is that, like, did they rename it Luthadel?
Could be. Yeah, it definitely doesn't seem to be anywhere on the map. The map of the Final Empire. Although there is the terrace section of the map, like the terrace dominance, which I think in a previous epigraph he told us it was up north, which is totally where it is on the map. So that part fits at least.
Yeah, the snowy mountains to the north or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I assume they're snowy mountains. I don't think we've actually had a description, but just the fact that he's got, like, the local Pac-Man makes me sort of think of the Himalayas.
Right. I agree. It gives me that same impression. And then we meet Marsh, who apparently kind of looks like Kelsier a bit because they're brothers. And him and Kelsier have a whole thing. And we won't get into all the details about it except to pick on a couple of things. Like, the one that really sticks out to me is the little, very short interaction they have about Kelsier's wife. And Marsh is like, sometimes I wish that she'd been the one to come back from the pits instead of you.
But he mentions that in spite of what she did. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Which makes me think that maybe they both loved her and that she stayed with Kelsier.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel like in that short, like 2 or 3 sentence interaction, you read a whole world of history between these two brothers over this girl. But beyond that, it does come out that he was formerly the leader of the Ska Rebellion, but he's stopped that life now. He's gone on. He's a regular guy running a business or something. Somebody that we know that Vin and Kemen tried to scam him, and that's how they picked up on the fact that she had powers in the first place, because Marsh detected that.
Because that's his, like, he's a seeker, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
Kelsier mentions him being a seeker who can detect when other people are using allomancy.
Right.
And I like the part where he stops and he's like, so who came to who, Kelsier? Did you go to Yedden or did Yedden come to you? And Kelsier totally sidesteps that question by being like, well, what does it matter, really?
Yeah. Which, may go kind of hand in hand with his ulterior motives, which is to kill the Lord Ruler. He's like, I'm going to figure out a way to do this. And to do that, I'm going to have to make it appear as if the rebellion is hiring us so that I can get close to the Lord Ruler.
Yeah, here's my excuse.
He definitely has a personal stake in this, and it seems like wants some personal revenge for being sent to the pits and for losing his wife there. But in the end, Marsh was like, you know what? You actually seem legit this time. We'll talk. And then we find out that Vin was totally like watching at the keyhole this whole conversation also. That girl.
I did think it was the bit that I related to in this whole conversation was when Kelsier turns around and says, hey, you always told me I should do something meaningful with my life. Well, now I am. Why are you complaining? And I'm just like, wow, was Marsh like the father surrogate during like growing up? Like, what happened to their parents? Because that seems like the sort of conversation a lot of kids will have with their parents when they do something the parents don't approve of.
Yeah, and I read even more into it than that personally, because he's got this thing where he's like, you seem sincere this time, and it seems like one of those relationships where Marsh feels like he's given Kelsier lots of chances to do the right thing, and Kelsier always picked the easy way where he's off making money with his thief friends and not really caring about anybody else.
Yep. Doing the whole you don't believe in anything greater than yourself deal.
Which, I mean, to be fair, we haven't seen too much of Kelsier that indicates that that's not true.
Oh yeah, I
he's
think
very
Marsh is
self-centered.
bang on the money.
But he says that going to the pits changed him. He told us that earlier, and that he wants to do something for the Ska in addition to his personal vendetta. And I don't know how true you might think that is, if that's just an excuse for what he's trying to do, but that's what he's claiming anyway.
Yeah.
And then Vin has not learned not to carry metal on her because she doesn't know anything about how these powers work, so he senses her outside. And I like the part where she's kind of listening at her own door, and she thinks that like he's like the hall's gotten quiet, he must have left, and then he knocks right next to her head and totally surprises her, and she's like, he's so good, he's good at this game. And she totally trusts. He's like, what did you think of Marsh? And she's like, what do you mean? I hardly saw him. What are you talking about? And he's like, you're not going to admit that I caught you, are you? And she wants to smile back, but Reen's voice is coming to her again and saying, the man who wants you to trust him is the one that you must fear the most.
Yeah, she's
Which,
been
yeah,
really traumatized by all this.
Yeah, and her brother has drilled this stuff into her so much that it just pops up in her head all the time, and it's kind of sad. And then they go out, and they're going to start training, although there's the one moment where Kelsier goes into the kitchen, and everybody's in there laughing and eating and drinking and having a good time, and she can't bring herself to do it. She stands outside of the light and just watches inside from the darkness and can't join in, which is just a really sad moment.
Yeah.
But she notes that it's different to what she's heard before. Like Kammen's crew, it was almost a show of it, whereas these guys seem to be sincerely friends and on the same page, and they actually have a genuine bond, and they care about each other, and this is something she just can't quite understand. She wants to be a part of that. It would be nice to have that sort of, she just can't yet. But it's nice that she's seeing that it is actually different.
Right? That maybe something else does exist from what she's known.
Yeah.
And then Kelsier gives her the cloak. Were any of you surprised by this, the way that she was, where she's like, I thought I'd have to earn this in some way?
And he's like, what is there to earn?
Like, earn what? You've got the power.
Yeah, he's like, this is who you are, Vin. And she likes the cloak. And he gives her some metal and teases her about, maybe you want to look like a girl at some point. Just saying, putting that out there. And we move into our actual, for real, first allomancy lesson. Which, when you get right down to it, it's not all that much new stuff that we hadn't kind of put together from the previous chapters. Because even at the end of the last episode, we were talking about, okay, so we've basically figured out what, 7 or something of these metals do. And for the most part, we were pretty close and to being right on there.
Yeah. And it helps that, we've had other characters who have said, I'm this, and so now he's, like, we're automatically putting together, it's like, all right, so if you burn this metal, you're a smoker. Oh, like clubs, right, that's what he does. And I guess it just makes it more palatable, so you understand, all right, so we've heard of these powers before, this is what this does. It's more just like joining the dots together rather than trying to create new information.
Yeah, and he also gives us sort of a framework that's kind of interesting that we'd kind of touched on and thought about before, but it's like the metals are connected, and there's like, I think Jamie was the first one to kind of catch on to it, but it's like they seem to be paired up where there's a metal that pushes and a metal that pulls, and that's what he's telling her. And it's most obvious with steel and iron because they literally push and pull, but just as a theoretical framework for the allomancy table, which is at the end of the book, that there's physical abilities, there's mental abilities, there's internal abilities, there's external abilities, and each of them has like these two metals, that one is a regular metal and one is an alloy of that metal, which we touched on last time. Did I do a convincing act last time of being like, I don't know, is this metal an alloy or is it a regular metal? I didn't want to give away too much about the alloys at the time.
I think I was just hung up on the fact it's like, well, it's a fantasy world. How they create metals in this world may be very different to how metals are created or mined in our world. Just because in our world you have to use iron to make steel doesn't necessarily mean the same thing in this world. So at the time, I'm just like, well, it could just be a standard metal. And then it's real world applications instead. Let's go.
Actual real science.
Yeah, it gets very scientific, which I think is probably surprising to a lot of people. With why do you need to make your crazy magic system so scientific?
Well, I mean, a lot of the best fantasy series seem to be doing that these days with Dresden Files and King Killer.
I think it's nice that there are some rules though, and they're rules that are like simple concepts for us to understand, because if you're applying real world science to it. Which I mean, I quite like that. I like facts and I like black and white. I'm not one for this grey area. Oh, he can move this because he's magic. But why? What's making him magic? I like that there's a reason that they can do these.
Great.
Yeah, I think it's nice.
And there's an interesting thing in a funny story in the annotations for this section, because originally. How tin is the metal that like enhances your senses or whatever. Originally, silver was going to be that metal in the book, and when he wrote the first draft of the book, it had silver as that metal because he thought that silver was used to make pewter. And he says it went back to like when he was a little kid, and he was like painting, like the little models that you use for games or whatever, these little lead figures. And the guy at the game store or the hobby store told him that they were going to start making them out of pewter instead of lead, and that they were going to be more expensive. And when these new ones came out, and he was like, why? And the guy told him because there's silver in pewter, so that makes it more expensive. And so he went his whole life thinking that silver was used to make pewter. And when he wrote the book, he put that in there, and he really didn't want to take it out because if you'll remember, the people who can use tin, they call them tin eyes. And he didn't think that sounded nearly as cool as silver eye. And so he really wanted to keep that in there.
He's got a point there.
Yeah, I agree. But eventually he's just like, okay, it's not scientific enough if I keep the silver in there, so we'll make it tin.
Oh, it's a sad problem.
Okay, so Vin's first lesson is not about allomancy, but about attitude. And he gives her a big speech about how the mists are theirs. And like this is their world. They're Mistborn. And he even gives kind of this ancient thing where he's like, the ministry claims that Mistborn are descendants of the only men who remained true to the Lord Ruler during the days before his ascension, but other legends whisper that they were something beyond even the Lord Ruler's power, something that was born on the day the mists first came upon the land. So he gets very kind of philosophical and stuff there for just a second, but it's probably very important to talk her out of like a lifetime of being convinced that the mists are not someplace you should be. We've seen how scared and frightened the Ska are of going out in the mists. And he tells her they don't have to worry about running into anybody. None of the soldiers will care because they'll think they're just, important Mistborn people out for some training.
I did think it was sort of odd. He mentions that, everyone knows that the great houses have Mistborn, but it's like almost like a social faux pas to ask their identities. I'm like, well, okay, I can sort of see that, but this is a world where the great houses are sort of competing for financial benefit against each other. So surely they're going to send out their spies to try and determine those identities so that they know, right?
You'd think that, right? And then I think part of it is, I mean, and we saw how when a Mistborn attacked Keep Venture, they assumed that it was like somebody coming to assassinate the Lord of the House because Mistborn are just that dangerous. And so I think part of it probably is, you don't want your enemies knowing who your super assassin is necessarily. If they're going to be effective at sneaking around and assassinating people, then if they're a secret, that's even better.
Which, like, again, totally makes sense, but it's just, yeah, like, I think he said, like, no one asks, or it's like a rude question. Like, I was like, oh, so like asking someone's age or something, is that where we're going with this? But it just seemed like that's information that is a vital benefit for your enemies to know. So surely there's got to be some sort of spy network out there to try and determine that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he even says, he's like, who is Mistborn is always the focus of like a bunch of gossip.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know. Okay, so he starts showing her how to burn metals. She learns about pewter, which we already knew about. She learns about tin. And it's an interesting note that tin enhances your senses, but it apparently allows you to see through the mists, at least a bit, to the point that she can see stars in the sky, which, I don't know, in my brain, enhancing your sight doesn't let you see through something that's blocking it, usually. So that always seemed like an interesting little note there, that it's like, oh, I can see way further now, which makes me way more comfortable in the mists.
I mean, maybe it's like enhancing your sight so it's like not as affected by blockages like that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess is the implication. I don't know. That was a really nice moment where she saw the stars and was like got a bit choked up. I thought that was poetic.
Yeah, she had no idea what they were. She's like, what is that? Like, oh wow, you can't even see those on a good night most of the time. So it's kind of a sad world when you realize that it's like nobody can even see stars at night.
Sort of reminded me of the bit from Lord of the Rings where Sam and Frodo are walking through Mordor and then they look up and they can see the stars above them through all the smoke, and it's like, oh yeah, the world's not completely shit.
So we find out about how alloys are very specific in their percentages for allomancy. Allomancer's pewter is 91% tin, 9% lead, and so on and so forth. And you can get sick from burning one that's too far away from the correct ratio.
I thought that was pretty cool. Nice little addition to have. So that means you've really got to, I'm assuming they probably have to metalwork themselves to get the right metals. They all have to learn to be blacksmiths effectively.
You'd probably want to, right? I mean, I think he says that you can find people selling like allomancy metals if you know where to go in every town.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're trying to hide the fact that you're a Mistborn, you probably don't want to show up at the local allomancy shop and be like, I need a vial with all 8 metals in it, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All metals are linked, 2 for every power, 1 pushes and 1 pulls, and the second is usually an alloy of the first. You pull with zinc and push with brass. You use pewter to push your body, which that's the pushing and pulling with tin and pewter seems a little bit like a stretch to make that metaphor work to me. I mean, the pushing your body maybe kind of makes sense because you're making yourself stronger, but I don't see how tin is really pulling.
Yeah.
I guess you're pulling more information from your surroundings.
That's true. I hadn't thought about it like that. She uses bronze, which she says, oh yeah, that's what seekers like my brother use. All steel inquisitors are seekers at least, because they have to go and hunt down half-breed children and noblemen who use allomancy improperly.
And I like that
is a scary note, because it means that what if there are some Mistborn inquisitors?
Yeah, that's true. Gosh, I didn't think about that. But I do like that they address the fact that he's not sure if they are seekers and then become inquisitors, or because they are inquisitors they have the power of seekers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he doesn't know. They don't know enough about the inquisitors. They don't even understand how they're alive with giant spikes running through their brains. So, and then we learn about copper and smokers and how it hides you from allomancy, or from seekers rather, and it can make you immune to emotional allomancy. And Vin's like, ooh, I need some of that. People keep messing with my head.
Which is interesting that Clubs was so worried about Breeze messing with his emotions. I'm just like, Clubs, your allomancy is literally turning Breeze's shit off.
Yeah. And that's what Kelsier tells him at the time. He's like, he couldn't really do anything to you unless you wanted him to. And then Clubs says, and it's kind of what led us on a bad path last time, but he's like, with guys like that, you never know how if you're being manipulated, copper or no copper. Which led us to theorizing last time that the copper was the one pulling on emotions or whatever, when in fact the copper blocks that.
Yeah, we're just looking at it from the wrong angle.
It was interesting too. I mean, Kelsier talks about that, like, consistently burning your metals. I know they say, like, the to be burning most of the time, but, like, too much of it could sort of break them. Maybe Clubs is at a point where, I mean, like, he's running the shop with the front, and he's got people that are also able to like, that are smokers, but maybe he doesn't use his power all the time, and maybe that's why he's sort of somewhat reluctant to say things around Breeze in particular. But he's a bit older, maybe he's just he can't.
Yeah, Kelsier specifies, like, if you go around flaring your metals all the time, it stretches things too far and things can start breaking, which that sounds kind of interesting.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, these are they're still humans, and their powers have to have upper levels as well as lower ones, or upper limits.
Then Vin almost impales herself with a rusty nail until Kelsier stops it. That girl, she's too paranoid for her own good.
Oh gosh.
Well, I guess there's one way to learn. I mean, when you make mistakes like that, you're not likely to make them again. Whereas if he taught her, like, iron pulling and steel pushing, or is it the other way around? Like, if he just taught her straight off the mark, she might have done this in her room by accident at one point.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then we get to his next lesson, which is, he's like, in allomancy and in life, actions have consequences. And if you can judge the consequences, then you will be successful. And so he points out to her, if you're carrying something really heavy, burning pewter, and then all of a sudden you run out, you could hurt yourself. And he even says that he's seen guys, like, die from wounds they just shrugged off when they were burning pewter, and then once their pewter ran out, they're dead. But with iron and steel, it's kind of literal. Pushing and pulling things have consequences. And Kelsier really focuses. He's like, these are the best metals. And, if you can judge what's going to happen when you push and pull on stuff, you will be, like, way ahead of the game. And we know from his fight earlier that he's, like, kind of an expert with these metals. He was really good at using them. So it kind of makes sense that he's like, these are the ones. These are the powerful metals. But he does leave out, in this little conversation, the two higher metals. We get to learn about pretty much all of the 8, but the 9 and 10 we still don't know. Well, we know.
Of course.
She doesn't know what atium is necessarily, other than it's really valuable. But
right.
We have a pretty good idea that it's the 10th metal from what they've said previously. We still don't know what it does.
I'm still banking on summoning volcanoes.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
But there's been very little talk about the 9th metal. So it really makes you wonder. It's like, is it also super awesome but impossible to get a hold of? Or is it, like, kind of sucky? I don't know.
It's got to be, I would want to think that it's a pair like the other metals. So whatever atium does, maybe it does the opposite.
So it stops volcanoes.
Yeah, sure.
So is it an alloy of atium, or? Oh no, that wouldn't make sense, because then it'd be the 10th and atium would be the 9th.
Well, I think atium is the one so far that we know doesn't actually exist in real life. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess they could say that it's an alloy of atium, and we would have no way of knowing.
Yeah, true.
Just if these metals pair up, I was saying, if these metals pair up too, we're already looking at an 11th metal. Is there a 12th metal? Are there more metals?
Yes.
I'm almost wondering if the 11th metal, like, contains all of the metal's powers, and it's like an unending flow of it or something crazy like that.
See, and Jamie's question is actually really interesting, and I was thinking about how to bring it up, but the possibility that an 11th metal exists, which Kelsey has shown us, it kind of brings some very important questions to the table, because we know that allomancy has been around a good long time. We were theorizing before, maybe it started with the Lord Ruler, maybe before that. The Lord Ruler's been around for 1,000 years. We know that. So allomancy has been practiced for, it seems like there's a good chance, at least 1,000 years. And they have this knowledge, this kind of general knowledge, that there are 10 metals. So the possibility that there's an 11th metal brings the whole thing into question, because either Kelsier's wrong or lying intentionally, which is totally possible, or there really is an 11th elementic metal, which means that everything they think they know about allomancy is brought into question. Just like Jamie said, is there a 12th metal? Is there 15, 17, you know?
Didn't they make a point that like the 11th metal is I think Kelsier said a couple of chapters ago the 11th metal is like suppressed knowledge by the Lord Ruler because it's like, you know, it's how he maintains his power. So if it could be there are heaps of other metals out there, but the Lord Ruler is just keeping that knowledge to himself because he doesn't want to. I don't know. The reading I got was that he has granted these powers to people by his own grace. So he's given them what he thinks they need to know, and he's keeping the really good stuff away from them so they don't become too powerful, and he hoards that to himself so that he can just stay above it. So I think they made that explicit with the 11th one, so maybe there are others out there as well. He's just like, you know, you guys don't need that. I'm keeping that.
Interesting. So, you know, I kind of like that idea that there's God knows how many metals out there, and he's just hiding the really cool ones from you. Which, if there's a volcano metal out there, then geez, what must these other ones do?
Earthquakes, meteors,
tsunami.
Now it's just like black materia summoning meteor.
Yeah, another Final Fantasy reference for you there.
In case anyone missed it, he called it out. It's like, that's Final Fantasy 7,
Yeah,
but not the remake.
7, the good one.
Oh, and then we end the chapter here with Kelsier putting down a big ingot and launching himself into the air and being like, "Come on, Vin, let's go." And shockingly to me, in a way, she's like, "All right, I'll do it," and she just takes off into the sky. Which, with how paranoid she is, I'm really kind of shocked that she just went for it.
Yeah, it's a pretty big leap of faith right there.
Yeah. Well, obviously, he could have let her die with a rusty nail, and he didn't, so I feel like maybe she's starting to trust him a little more.
I think it's also like she's really excited to actually have these powers and be able to do stuff with them. So now she's just like completely forgotten her paranoia and is going straight for, you know, oh my god, I can do this stuff. I need to do more. Like she's like the dopamine effect has taken place in her brain, and now she's hooked on it.
I know I'd be excited if I suddenly had like 8 superpowers.
Would any of us not?
I mean,
I'd
so
still
far
be
he
real
hasn't
fast
led
in
her
the air.
astray, though.
It's true.
So she's
she
got
knows
reason
anyway.
to trust him. She just keeps having her brother pop into her head, but like she wants to be a part of this. She's enjoying, I guess, that things are different, but she's still living her reality where she can't trust anyone. But you know, how is she ever going to learn if she doesn't jump into it either? This is the only guy who's going to teach her.
Okay, well, that is the end of the chapter. So any final thoughts from anybody before we move into predictions?
Yeah, I think that I really like these 2 chapters. I hope that we get to see more of Vin kind of discovering how her powers work. And I hope that she kind of learns to trust these people a little bit more and becomes more in sync with them and doing the job. I think that'd be really neat to see that character development.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see Vin run away anytime soon. I mean, she's definitely shaping up to be a main character. I don't think she's just going to cut and run and leave everyone behind. I think she will learn to trust these people and, yeah, sort of live that way. I mean, she's always going to be paranoid. You know, you can't lose your past, but that could turn out to be be a bad thing later on, especially if she's, you know, potentially going to go undercover as part of this crew, you know, not trusting people. But she can stand back. She can watch. She knows, you know, where her exits are. I think she'd be quite safe in those situations because she would be looking out for different things. So I think she'll be okay.
So you don't think her inexperience, or maybe, I mean, she's really young, even though she's so paranoid. So she may even have some kind of naivety about some of the things that she has encountered before when she starts going undercover.
Look, she'll probably make, you know, there's probably a point where she'll possibly become a little bit cocky or something, and she will mess up. I don't think it's going to go all smooth sailing for her, but I think overall she's pretty smart. I think she'll be okay with this crew.
Okay.
I did have a thought, before about in the first chapter we covered. I'm really interested to see how the morality of Breeze's an army together. We've had that discussion between Breeze and Ham, I think, before about, like, it's not right. You can't just make people do your will. And I feel like this is now exactly what they're asking, for him to use his powers to raise an army against their will. I mean, they've already proven that they don't want to step up. They don't want to be a part of this. Are we about to have an army of people that they didn't make the choice to do this? So I'm a little bit nervous about how that's going to go long term.
And I mean, you kind of have to wonder if they only do it because Breeze kind of, allomancies them into it. What happens when they, go off to these caves and start training and there's no longer someone there kind of messing with their emotions?
Yeah, exactly. Do they stop once that, I mean, he's quite powerful from all accounts that we've heard so far, but when that stops, is it in his presence that that's a thing? How are they going to make this happen? Do they need to just really influence a few core people and the others will follow? Are they really going to, pull on the emotions of 10,000 people? Yeah, it's a little bit worrying.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. There's a very big moral question there. Okay, let's do some predictions. How about Dak? You want to start? What do you predict?
I don't know. Now that they have laid out the plan, I'm going back to my, all right, you've once you lay out a plan before it, in fiction, before it happens, something about that plan goes wrong, and I think it's gonna be Vin at this point. I think she's feeling confident now that she's got her allomancy, but I think when it comes down to actually having to impersonate a noble and go into that, she's gonna be terrified. I feel like she's probably, just from what Doxson mentions, he actually did bump into the Lord Ruler himself at one point. I feel like Vin's probably going to have that, and she's going to freak the hell out when that happens.
Yeah, I would probably. That's terrifying.
Oh yeah, but beyond that, I'm still not sure. They keep mentioning these Colossus creatures in the plans. I'm just like, all right, they're still being very coy about what those are. So at some point, those are gonna factor in, and it's going to be hell. But beyond that, I don't have too much in the way of solid predictions of what's coming up.
Okay. What about you, Jamie? You got any other predictions?
I think the Lord Ruler seems to have a pretty good idea of things going on. When they talk about, the Lord Ruler knows about the caves, he just doesn't care. I think that maybe these guys, they're not going to be as stealthy as they think they are. And I think that I'm not sure which stage of the plan, but I think that, the Lord Ruler is going to know what's going on much quicker than they anticipate he will. So whether stuff's going to go down in the next couple of chapters or whether it's going to be or anything like that, but I would predict that, he'll know what's going on, and, things will go pretty badly at some point.
Interesting. So the Lord Ruler's more on the ball than they're giving him credit for. Okay. What about you, Joe? What do you got?
With everything that's happening right now, I'm trying to think of what I would think is immediately going to happen next. I'm more focused on the next piece of the story, because I feel like every time I make a prediction about what's going to happen next, the book takes a turn I'm not expecting. So I'm going to keep my predictions pretty close to where we are now. So in the next chapter, I predict that we're going to see probably maybe a little bit of time skip, a little jump, and I'm hoping that we get some kind of development that we haven't seen before with these characters, where we get to see Vin interacting one-on-one with maybe some of the other characters, like maybe one-on-one with Breeze, helping him do things, one-on-one with Hammond, helping him do things, or maybe even she spends some time with clubs and learns to craft something. I'm kind of hoping that we get to see a little bit more character development between Vin and some of the other characters that are not Kelsey or Doxson. So
yeah. Somebody theorized last time that everyone would kind of get everyone on the crew would get their own kind of moment where they got to show off what they did. So that would kind of fit if Vin's going to spend some time with some of them, maybe. Okay. Well, I think that's it for today's episode. Next week we are going to be covering chapters 8
and 9.
And 9. Yeah, thank you for getting there before me. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's 8 and 9, but once again, I never trust myself. I'm like, I have it in my head what it's going to be, and I don't trust myself. I'm going to say it wrong, so I take too long. Yes, 8 and 9. That's what we're doing next time. Anybody who's reading along. And to answer questions that I've gotten, the intro and outro song, that's called My Revolution by Miracle of Sound. Check them out. There is a link on our Podbean page over in the links to his website. Love his music. He's one of the only people that I support on Patreon because I really love his stuff. I think that's about it. Anybody got last thoughts you want to share before we head out?
No, all good.
No, all from me.
Okay, good deal. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bring